part of the Press Play Podcast Network.
Look up in the sky. It's a bird. It's a plane. It's Superman.
This is Jason J. Lewis, the voice of Superman on Justice League Action. This is Mark Wade, writer of Superman Birthright, and you're listening to the Krypton Report.
And here we go again. It's time for dun dun dun, the next chapter, the next adventure of Adam-Man versus Superman. Chapter 6, Adam-Man's Challenge. And if you're just tuning in, you might want to back up a couple episodes. Or an episode or two. I had to rush out and save the kids. Who knows what those two are up to. Whew, Adam-Man's Challenge. X-ray vision. Superman flies in. Burns down the door. Saves Lois and Jimmy. Luthor gets rid of his thugs. Pulls them back using the coins to transport them back to his hideout. Now Luthor is working on synthetic kryptonite. He's missing one element though. Radium. Perry, the managing editor of the Daily Planet, is not happy with Clark. Clark's not pulling his weight and doing good work. Jimmy, grab a camera. The TV manager appears to be Luthor, working with the TV station truck that's outside. Ginny goes to find out about the radium, which is now being alerted to the police to have everyone who's looking for radium, what do you call it? Flagged, so to speak. Sorry, I blinked for a moment. And when Jimmy goes to follow up a lead on uranium and radium, he is captured. Chapter 7, Mercy of Adam-Man. Is a weird episode because this episode is right smack dab in the middle of this serial, and it has Luthor in the cave talking to this professor doctor that they kidnapped to get the radium, the story of Krypton. And he recounts everything during the narration from the opening of the first episode of the serials back in chapter 1 of 1948 Superman about Jor-El and everything. And he talks about how this was all sent as a transmission and aboard a ship, and he alone was the only one that could decode this, and it was brought it to him. And that's how he knows the story of Superman and the planet Krypton. Meanwhile, Luthor alerts one of his men, and we find out it's Harris, a janitor that works at the Daily Planet. Luthor has men planted everywhere. Clark was working late, and as Harris enters, Clark passes out. Harris has a piece of the kryptonite. Harris goes to another dude and says, Clark Kent just passed out when I walked in. That's not supposed to hurt anyone but Superman. What does that make Kent? So Kent is Superman? When Harris leaves, Clark gets up and tries to sneak out and get away. Clark is hanging out the window trying to fool the men. Later, a ship is being launched and Superman is the guest of honor. It's a very abrupt change in the episode. All of a sudden, Superman is going to be at this guest of honor and he doesn't want to hide from the kryptonite. He's okay with being out in the open, knowing that this weapon is out there. Superman is giving this speech when all of a sudden he falls and a man comes up and says, I'm a doctor. And they have to take Superman to the hospital. The thugs in the crowd who had the K are seen knocking out the ambulance drivers, switching clothes with them, and they're the ambulance that pulls up that's going to take Superman to the hospital. The kryptonite is on top of Superman, and he's being taken to the Atom Man. When Lois gets a suspicion of that ambulance and the man she saw driving as her and Jimmy begin to follow. Chapter 8. Into the Empty Doom. The best single episode of any of these serials. Especially if you're a Lois fan. Noelle Neal has so much more spunk and fun in this serial than she did the last time, and this episode is the proof. Superman meets Atom Man at the very beginning as Atom Man puts him in the machine. This time, Superman can't move fast enough that he disappears from the eye, and Atom Man is going to transfer him to the Empty Doom. Superman, right here, steals a line. Well, I wouldn't say he steals. He says a line that later is stolen by Arnold Schwarzenegger. He says, "I'll be back. I'll be back. I'll be back." He says like 3 or 4 times. It's ridiculous. But all of a sudden, Superman's gone. Clark's missing. And the Daily Planet starts to wonder, is Clark Kent Superman? Perry, who has been a hard hitting journalist who always wants facts, tells Lois to write a story stating that Clark Kent is Superman. It seems very out of character, but yet that's what happens. Lois fights Perry, disagreeing. So she's sitting at her her typewriter, and Superman is trying to reach out from the Great Doom. And basically a ghostly Superman figure starts typing on her typewriter, telling her that this is Superman. And so Superman's giving Lois information of what to do. Jimmy and Lois hatch a plan, and Lois goes into Perry's office complaining about the story about Clark Kent being Superman. Just then, Perry gets a call from Clark saying, "I'm on a big story. Gotta go. Can't talk long. I'll be in touch." Hangs up. Perry then says, "Oh, that was Kent. I guess he's not Superman. He's on to something. Wait, he didn't say where he is. Trace that call." That leads to nowhere. That never comes back up. That is a horrible piece of dialogue that should have been injected. But anyway, what we find out when Lois walks out of Perry's office is that Jimmy had snuck downstairs to a payphone, called Perry's office pretending to be Clark. Jimmy comes in, they're chuckling together, and Lois sends him out for burgers and coffee. Superman once again communicates with Lois of a plan. Jimmy comes back with burgers, but no coffee. Lois and Jimmy know what to do and where to go, and go to the cave to confront Atom Man to get a chance to bring back Superman. Chapter 9. Superman crashes through. Inside the Daily Planet, Perry's office, we see headlines of basically Superman comes back, Superman returns, and all this, and with some shot news footage that are just footage from the serials themselves, they use the television news to trick Luthor into thinking that Superman is out there doing things. Luthor is upset. He can't believe, so he decides he's going to send one of his guys into the Empty Doom to make sure Superman is still there. He sends him in to the Empty Doom, and it's very much like a precursor to like a Phantom Zone kind of thing. Like, it looks like, a ghostly type transparent figure walking around in what seems to be outer space. The guy comes in, and Superman starts to fly down and uses the guy's entrance as a way out, and Superman ejects himself from the Empty Doom, knocks out, there's a fake K laser that's shooting, but it hits Atom Man, and we see that Atom Man is just a robot. Well, or at least a robot head. Clark tells Perry that it's Luthor. Perry yells at Lois for the previous story, and she quits. And then we see she's in Luthor's office and asking for a job to work for his television because she is angry at the Daily Planet. She wants to get even with Clark Kent. We see Lois outside entering people for TV. And this is when we get to see that the TV truck is actually using a sophisticated machine hidden in the back of the truck to look at safes to get the codes to rob these places. That's part of Luthor's plan. Meanwhile, Jimmy's on his way back, and a train is coming right at Jimmy, whose car is in trouble. Chapter 10. Adaman's Heat Ray. Lois is still working for Lex. Using the TV truck to rob places, she is unaware of her involvement in these robberies. We have a scene where Luthor uses a man to make himself look good by catching this man in some sort of burglary act, trying to build up the public's interest that Luthor is a good man. Clark and Jimmy miss Lois, and they find Lois outside interviewing. We find out that Lois getting fired is actually a gag, and it was part of a plan to get into Luthor's organization. Meanwhile, while they're out on the street and Lois is doing the TV interviewing, Clark and Jimmy show up and ask to be interviewed. And there's a gun hand thug in the Daily Planet with a gun telling Perry to open the safe, because the Daily Planet happens to have a safe. Superman arrives, and Clark, Lois, and Jimmy get locked in a room. Because Superman arrived to stop the safe, comes out, then hijinks happen, and Clark, Lois, and Jimmy are locked in a room in the building as gas is filling it up. The funny thing about these serials is there's so many times that you're not even sure. If you blink, you miss something because it's so repetitive, the same beats over and over. Of Superman saving the day, Superman doing this, Clark and Lois up. Kit, I just got a call. Blah, 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 story. Go. Oh no, hey, that's one of Adam Man's people. Let's chase him. And it gets repetitive, and sometimes you can be watching it, paying attention, and still say to yourself, what just happened? How did they get here? And try binging these things. It's horrible. I recommend, if you watch any serials, watch this one. Especially Chapter 8. And if you want to watch them all, if you're that dedicated, split it up and watch them about 2 a day. Once a week, something like that. Spread them out. No more than 2 a day, because you will burn yourself out. So here we go. We got one more episode left where we will break down 6 through 15. Remember.
Look up in the sky.
We just want to say, if you've enjoyed this podcast, please check out other podcasts on the Press Play Podcast Network.
Remember to check out Krypton Report on all social media platforms. Go to linktree.com/Krypton Report. You find all of our information right there. If you want to keep Krypton from exploding, join our $1 a month Patreon. That's right, for $1 a month, you'll get extra special content that you don't get on the main show, like movie commentaries and whatever else comes out of our mouths. So check it out, patreon.com/Krypton Report.
If you are like Tyler and James and can't get enough Super Talk, check out these other podcasts. Digging for Kryptonite, Supergirl Radio, The Last Sons of Krypton, the Superboy Legacy Podcast, All-Star Superfans, Superman the Animated Podcast, The Aspiring Kryptonians, Always Hold On to Smallville, Caped Wonder, The Geek of Steel, and Truth, Justice, and Hope Podcast.
Hey, we're going to press pause and hear a few words from our other podcasts on Press Play Podcast Network.
Hello, Brooks here with the Books with Brooks monthly book club podcast. Here's how Books with Brooks works. We read one book a month and then we talk about it. Classics like Stephen King's The Shining, debut novels like We Are the Brennans by Tracy Lang, and tons of other compelling, life-changing stories, one book and 1 month at a time. So come read along with us and then listen in.
This is Dan Jurgens, and if you want to have a good time, keep listening to the Krypton Report.